You ever find yourself reading through the book of Jonah and you're surprised there's a chapter 4? Let's talk a little bit about where we've come in the story before we get to where we're going tonight. So in the first chapter of Jonah, we see Jonah being called by God to go to Nineveh and preach a message of destruction. Jonah doesn't really like this idea a whole lot, so he decides to head off in the opposite direction. He gets on a boat, God sends a storm, the sailors are panicked, he's thrown overboard, he's swallowed by a fish, he prays to God, he repents in his prayer to God of the mistakes that he's made. He prays a prayer of thanksgiving. He's spit out on the shore of Nineveh, and he goes into the city and preaches the message. This group of people that Jonah wanted nothing to do with repent. From the greatest official to the lowest citizen, the nation of Israel begs God for mercy. And you would think the story would end there. This is a victory story. What evangelist, what Christian, what person who has ever taken upon themselves to spread the gospel wouldn't love to have the ending in Jonah chapter 3? But that's not where the story ends. Let's take a minute and let's look at Jonah chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was angry. And he prayed to the Lord and said, "O Lord, is not this what I said when I was yet in my country? That is why I made haste to flee to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and relenting from disaster. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live." Now this seems like a kind of confusing passage. Jonah, having finally surrendered himself to the will of God, preaches a message to the people of Nineveh, and they repent. They call out to God for forgiveness. And God relents. God turns from the destruction that he was going to bring on Nineveh, and Jonah is furious. Now, this may seem like a kind of confusing progression in the story, but I want us to ask ourselves, have we ever found ourselves praying for God to return? I'm sure that you have, and I know that I have, and I don't want to imply that that's a bad thing, but I want us to think about the nature of our hearts when we're making that prayer. I know that oftentimes we look around the world and we feel overwhelmed with the sin that we see. There are horrible things happening every day, and at no point in history have we been more aware of the sin and the hurt and the pain that's all around us. And so if you're like me, I bet some of those times when you find yourself praying, "Lord, please return," it's because you want God to come and show people the way that things are supposed to be, the way that I think things are supposed to be. And that's the heart of the message at Jonah chapter 4. You see, Jonah found himself face to face with the radical mercy of God. And it didn't mesh with Jonah's perceived understanding of justice. Jonah wanted to see the enemy punished. He wanted to see the wrongs made right. He wanted to see people held accountable for the evil they've done. But our God is a merciful God with a mercy that extends beyond what we will sometimes understand. God's mercy is radical, and it doesn't pay attention to our prejudices, our judgments, our wishes, or our desires. So take some time and read the rest of Jonah chapter 4 and see how incredible God's mercy is and the lesson that he's not only teaching Jonah, but to us as well. Because chapter 4 really wraps up the story.